Welcome, and thanks for listening to the Big Ideas for Better Places podcast today. If you like what you hear, we'd encourage you to please leave us a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this. This really helps other folks find out about the podcast, our great guests, and the wisdom that they have to share. So without further ado, on to today's episode.
Please listen carefully.
Welcome to the Big Ideas for Better Places podcast from CityWorks Expo. My name is Brad Stevens, and I'll be your host today. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our guest, Mr. Jake Hodesh, the VP of Operations at People's Liberty in Cincinnati. How are you doing today, Jake?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us. Super excited to be on today.
Well, we're really glad to have you. And I know you guys are about to have a big event of your own. And tell us a little bit about what you guys have got on tap for next week.
So next week we're hosting seven cities from throughout the region. What we did is we reached out to a funder, whether it was a foundation or a community fund, in 7 cities that are cities that we visited or that we have a relationship with, and we invited all of them to bring a small group of folks that are doing amazing stuff in their town to Cincinnati for 36 hours of an exchange. And so we kind of show them around town, introduce them to a bunch of our grantees, give them a chance to peek under the hood here at People's Liberty and see how we're doing things a little differently, how we see investing and changing this place that we call home, and hopefully learn a bunch from them, the folks that are coming in, as much as we're sharing some of the things that we're doing here. So yeah, it should be a good time. Early December, great time to be in Cincinnati, Ohio.
It's not going to be windy at all, is it?
We'll see. It's actually beautiful right now, but we'll see. We'll see what December brings.
Well, good deal. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, Jake, and kind of how you envision what the work is you do these days.
Okay, yeah. So I've essentially worked in community and economic development, almost my entire career, and I was fortunate enough to team up with Eric and Megan, and now Aurora. About 4 years ago, Eric Avner at the Hale Foundation, Haile, Hale Foundation here in Cincinnati, was working with Megan Deal, at the time, Megan Trishler now, but she was working with Megan on a new concept for us in this region, in greater Cincinnati, which would be an opportunity for a foundation like the Hale Foundation to invest differently. And for them at the time, what they were thinking about was, what would happen if we tweaked the foundation a little bit and enabled the foundation to fund individuals directly to go and make the changes that they want to see in their communities. And the thought was, like, what if we had less nonprofits or less organizations that need to be created to go be a part of the change or create the change in the streets that are necessary? What if we know a bunch of great people, and I'm sure there's many more, what if we started to invest in them and empower them to create the change that we all hope to see here? And some of these things will be little things, and some will be bigger. Some will take 3 months or 6 months. Others are going to be a year-long or multi-year commitments. But let's start to think about what that would look like. And they tapped me about 4 years ago to kind of join the team and help start thinking about this thing. And Megan and I and Eric have been working on it ever since. And we've brought some other great people along with us. And we call this thing People's Liberty. And it's been an amazing kind of like experiment in philanthropy and an experiment in community development. And we throw money and time and energy and mentorship and hand-holding behind a bunch of people and a bunch of great, creative, engaging projects, all here in greater Cincinnati, northern Kentucky. And it's been a wild ride. We committed to do it for 5 years, and we're closing our 3rd year. So by the end of 2019, we'll be done with People's Liberty, and we'll move on and do something else. But it's been an amazing experiment, and there's a lot of work that we've done and a lot of the investments that we've made and the relationships we've built that'll live on beyond this 5 years for sure. So it's been great.
I'm wondering, I love it when I hear that people have a timeline for their project with a very specific end date. I think that too rarely we do that, and we often let things live way past when they're effective projects.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I'm wondering, though, when you guys look at that 5-year timeline, at the end, when you look back, what do you think success looks like at that point?
Yeah, for us, it's that we've invested in, empowered, uncovered, supported hundreds of people that have gone on to do the projects they wanted to do, or have come and worked with us in one capacity or another. We have this army of people who are capable of doing great things. We have an army of people that are confident and understand how to apply for money, raise money, spend money the right way, if that even makes sense, how to ask for help, how to utilize the resources that are available here. This is a resource-rich environment, and people are willing to help if you just ask the right way. And so I guess success for us looks like an army of people who are at the ready, and a body of work and a body of momentum that lives beyond the 5 years, that people are still either doing the projects that we funded them to start, they've moved on to their second or third project, or they might be inspiring, investing in, or mentoring the next group of people that are going to go and do some stuff. That at its simplest is success for us. This army of people out there doing their thing.
Very fascinating, and it's. I think that one of the things, so here in Roanoke, the project that kind of I started with was bringing the soup model here in terms of the micro-grant community meal. And one of the things we really had trouble with is getting individuals to be the people that are putting in applications. And I'm wondering, this is part of what you guys doing, really trying to empower and change who people look to for creating change in their communities, or are these people that are already doing the work that you're just finding and supporting, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a combination of the two, I'd say. I'd probably in every cohort of applicants, so we'll open up a round and say, there's 2 opportunities available now, 3 in 3 months, and then we have a group of 8, whatever it is. We consider each of those a cohort, and I would say in each of our cohorts, there's definitely going to be someone who's like for lack of a better term, a known entity, a name that people either know from having success in the past or doing something big in the past, and they're moving on and doing another project or trying to tackle another issue. But in each cohort, there's a majority of people that this might be their first thing or their first opportunity outside of an organization or a company, and they're either not a known entity in the cliche sense of that term, or they're kind of a first timer, and that's super exciting to us. Part of the reason for creating People's Liberty or starting it or thinking about it 4 years ago was Eric at the Hale Foundation at the time was trying to garner some support for a streetcar initiative here in the city, and the calls went out and the Facebook posts went out, and that group came together, it coalesced. And he looked in the room and he saw kind of like the village elders and folks who had 5 or 10 years left of activism and 5 or 10 years left of being the change agents and the leaders and the ones creating or inspiring the movements. And he was like, man, what's going to happen? Where's the next group? And why aren't they here right now with us? And that kind of creates that good army effect, or that's what inspired that. And so for us, it couldn't just be the known entities and the people that already show up who have already accomplished something or already changed something. It needed to be about discovery for us and bringing more people under the tent. And I'd argue that we've been really successful at that. There's a bunch of people that would never have an opportunity to talk to a major foundation, let alone have an office inside the building with a major foundation, let alone have foundation leaders' phone numbers in their phones and go swimming in their pools during the summer. Like, it's just, it's a mind meld. And that was part of what we wanted to do. We wanted to tear down this barrier of, well, foundations sit on the 11th floor of the office building and everybody else is down at the street level. And if you want money, just send that paper up the elevator and maybe we'll respond. No, it's not that. It's, I want to do this. I want to apply. I want to get funded. I don't want to have to create an organization to do this. I want to go do it now. And creating that sense of urgency of like this 5-year time limit, direct access to people who have funds and a Rolodex, all of that was super important to us. So by all means, we didn't just want to fund people who were already getting funded and doing things in a big way again and again and again. We wanted to, quote unquote, and I put this in quotes because it's a little demeaning, like uncover people. That was for sure the interest from the get-go.
I'm always intrigued. I tell a lot of folks that I go to the mall very rarely here, and it's always depressing for a number of reasons. But the biggest one is perhaps, I've been engaged in community work here in Roanoke for a little while, and I know a lot of people, but I never see anybody I know when I go to the mall. And I always wind up thinking, what if you could get these people engaged in being change makers? And so I wonder, in terms of you mentioned several things that you guys do, and I wonder what you think the biggest barrier to turning those kind of folks or turning really anyone into being a change maker or someone engaged in these issues?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So you only know who you know is one issue, and that's true in like physical networks, as in like the people that you touch every day and see every day, as much as it is in the bizarre social world that we live in online in the digital space. Your network is only as far as it can possibly be there. So part of what our challenge has been to quote unquote uncover the people shopping in the malls as opposed to shopping on Main Street or whatever it is for you, has been to open ourselves up to different communities, to put ourselves in places we wouldn't normally be. And then once we get someone, an ambassador or a leader in that network or that community, empowering them to bring more people into the tent and challenging them to bring their best and brightest from their community in and say, look, this is an opportunity for all. If you want your people, whoever they are, to know about this and be exposed to this and more of your people to be here, you got to bring them. And we've been super fortunate at that. When you kind of look at at our website or our materials that are talking about the opportunities or that are sharing details or information about our past or current grant recipients, there's age diversity for sure. This isn't just for young people just out of college. There's socioeconomic diversity for sure, and race, education. I mean, it's pretty diverse, and we didn't have a standard that we were trying to meet. Our only standard was we want people that are known entities that can do great work, and we want to uncover new people that haven't had opportunities to play in this space, but that have a willingness and a desire to do that. And for us, like, uncovering people, finding people, discovering people, being introduced to new people, and then kind of like exploiting them in a way as being ambassadors to new communities was really important. Because if you're in the mall and you walk up to somebody and you're like, hey man, you should be a change agent, you should be a community development person, well, whatever, like, that's not going to work. But if you build a relationship with the mall cop and you're like, hey man, who's the best guy who comes here every day, who can do great work, whatever it is, all of a sudden that mall cop becomes your ambassador. We're taking this analogy way too far, but like that mall cop becomes your ambassador and leads you to great people and helps you discover and meet wonderful people who need to be brought in and empowered and invested in.
Well, it's fascinating to me because there's an incredible level of trust that you guys are putting out there, and in some ways it's way more risky than the normal foundation work. And I'm wondering kind of how you guys mitigate and allow yourselves to be that trusting of folks.
Yeah, I mean, well, from like a corporate boring level, we have contracts just like the foundation does with the 501c3 organizations that they invest in. We have grant agreements with each of our grantees. So from like a legal or contractual standpoint, we have a real relationship with you. We have a financial obligation to you, and you have a contractual obligation to us. But the cool thing is that contractual obligation on your side is to like go kick ass and do something freaking awesome. And like, I'll sign that contract all day. And we don't want any of your intellectual property. And we want you to be successful. And we want you to go do amazing stuff and change our community. So that's a good contract to sign. But all joking aside, from like this legal corporate standpoint, there are things in place that we're signing and you're signing, and we're entering into a legal contract with one another. But I'd argue that, look, foundations invest in organizations. That's what they do. That's how the structure is set up. And I'd argue that not all investments that we make in organizations are successful. They're not all great. You could argue that a lot of them aren't good at all, that they're bad, that you're not getting a great return on your investment, that recidivism in our jails and prisons hasn't gone down because of these investments, and child poverty hasn't gone down because of these investments, and the school system isn't any better because of these investments, et cetera, et cetera. And so what's the risk? What's the risk there in continuing to invest in crappy results? That sounds really risky and bad to me, versus having a real relationship with a human, investing in them and believing in their potential and giving them an opportunity to go solve some of these hard problems. I'd argue that I'd argue that a relationship with a human and giving a real person a real opportunity to go create change is a much better investment every day. Look, do we need big nonprofit organizations or medium-sized nonprofit organizations to go attack huge problems? For sure we do. But there's not just one single way to solve our community's problems. There's not just one single way to exercise all the opportunities that are here in our communities, and this is one extra thing we wanted to add to the Hale Foundation arsenal here in Cincinnati, and we've found it to be hugely successful. We found it to be empowering of our citizens, and we're excited by that. We continue to be excited by that.
That's fascinating. I love that idea of shifting the idea of what where risk comes into play in terms of we really don't have the answers right now, and so where's the risk in exploring new opportunities?
Yeah, no doubt.
I do wonder, because you guys are kind of, I think, low-key subversive in some ways in terms of turning to individuals in some way. We all know that leadership is incredibly important in terms of getting things done, but we've often found that these kind of movements are founded and wind up being largely coalition-based, and they start with these large teams at the very beginning. But you guys are looking in that opposite direction and asking individuals to play a bigger role. Is that something that you found pushback on, or how did you guys... how do you articulate why it's important for individuals to come and lead this situation?
Yeah, I don't know if we've taken on like the responsibility of articulating that. I think we're in and we express this and we appreciate it, that we are in a really unique position in that we People's Liberty are beholden to the Hale Foundation staff and the Hale Foundation board. But at the end of the day, these are private foundation dollars, and we're not really beholden to the public or public interest. These aren't city, state, county, federal dollars. These are Hale Foundation dollars to be used in a charitable way. We've agreed on terms with the IRS that these investments in individuals are charitable and are being used in a charitable way, and they are. So in a sense, we're beholden to ourselves and the foundation board, and there's checks and balances there. We're super fortunate. It's like if people are critical and people have been critical, we reach out to them and encourage them to do one of two things. Either A, apply for a grant and do something big, do something great, or if they think that this isn't the highest and best use of funds, that they should come and serve as a juror with our volunteer jury pool and help us pick better grantees. And generally, one of two things happens at that point. One, they come in and we have an interesting conversation, and then they kind of begin to participate in the People's Liberty Movement, or B, we never hear from them again. And so we believe that we're building a powerful organization, and it's a powerful organization of people, and it's not a registered 501c3. It's just a group of powerful people doing amazing work in our city, and we just our job is just to keep it going.
But I suppose there's incredible value too in terms of looking at it as from that experimentation lens as well, and that if you look at it from that, then you can tell people, well, sure, we expect some of these things to fail on some level, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, for sure, and we knew that from the jump that not all of these were gonna, come in 6 months, even though contractually you have 6 months to go finish this project, and not all of them are going to finish, and not all of them are going to use the funds in the way that we think is the highest and best use of the funds. Subversively, that's not really what this is about, right? It's about empowering people to go create change, and this project is just the beginning. But we're going to call on you in 2 or 3 years when there's the next streetcar thing or the next critical issue in our community. You're on the list. We invested in you. We got you. And we're now all in this together. We're not going to let you not be a part of this town, this community, this neighborhood moving forward.
It is, I think it's interesting that that those people come back from many different issues in terms of they may be leading the charge here, but they may be supporters in the future. And that's an interesting dynamic in some ways in terms of finding people that know when to take a step up and when to step back, but also when a project is successful and when a project is not, and when it's worth going after and when it's not. And this is a skill set that most of us haven't been able to develop, and you guys are building a curriculum that's almost as important as the money in some ways, isn't it?
Without a doubt. Yeah, we give everybody a key to our building. We give everybody the same Rolodex. We give everybody, unlimited use of the printer and the projectors and the event space. And yeah, it's it's by all means more than just it's more than just cutting checks.
We'd like to take a moment now to say thank you to our sponsors today. The Urban Affairs and Planning program at Virginia Tech's School of Public and International Affairs offers an interdisciplinary approach to understanding planning and policy for megaregions, cities, suburbs, and rural regions in the U.S. and abroad. UAP faculty have expertise in urban planning, architecture, urban design, economics, geography, political science, law, technology, and engineering, and provide students with a multifaceted understanding of how communities grow and change. Students apply their knowledge and professional skills by participating in real-world problem-solving with community clients through project-based studios and applied research. UAP emphasizes technical analysis and policy evaluation in approaching the complexities of modern communities. So big thanks today to the Urban Affairs and Planning program down at Virginia Tech for being our sponsor. If you'd like to hear more, check them out online. But without further ado, we'll get back to today's guest. Thank you. Well, it's interesting to me. I'm intrigued by this, again, this idea of experimentation. And, I think you mentioned failure as maybe it doesn't come about in the certain way, or they don't use the funds in exactly the way that you thought might be best, whatever. But it's interesting also from the perspective of, maybe it works perfectly, but it doesn't have at all the impact that you thought it was going to have. And so it's interesting to me, like how then you sort out the good experiments from the bad, and then how do you move on from those points where you have an experiment that goes really well, and then how do you work on solidifying that in some ways?
Yeah. So we have a bunch of processes in place, I guess, if you want to call it that. And I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's our small staff. We have real personal relationships with all of the grantees, which includes check-ins and coffees and visits to their sites and attending their events and participating in their meetings. And I think in general, if we sense a delay or a failure or a big issue, we'll step in and get more involved if and when that's necessary, or we'll give more time if and when that's necessary. Because again, for us, subversively, this isn't necessarily just about that indoor garden that's being grown in Bond Hill. Like, yes, it is on our website about that, and yes, it is in the contract about that, and yes, it is in our storytelling about that, but it's about growing a relationship with a real human who is going to be a part of the continuing change of this community for many years to come. And so failure is a funny word in that sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you planted 10 trees, but in your application you said you were going to plant 20. Okay. But you're still in the network. You still receive the support. You're still committed to this town more than you were before you got the grant. You've learned applicable skills and hand-to-hand community development combat skills that you didn't have 10 months ago, and you're going to pick up the phone when we call you and be a part of the next thing. So no, it wasn't a failure.
Well, yeah, and it's, in some ways it sounds like what you're doing is even bigger than supporting those individuals, is that you're creating an ecosystem wherein people recognize that there are support networks and that individuals in and of themselves can be change agents even. No
doubt. Yeah, for sure. And what we've started to see is that, now we're essentially 3 years in on grants through People's Liberty. And what we've started to see is, there's kind of like, there's a food group. Sorry for the pun, but there's a food group. So a bunch of grantees who have worked on food stuff. There is there's a built environment group. There's like these subjects, so to speak. And our job now, which we didn't think about 3 or 4 years ago, was like, well, we need to start connecting these grantees who all care about the same things, even though it's in neighborhood. That one's in neighborhood X, and this one's in neighborhood Y, and this one hasn't started yet, but they're going to be in neighborhood Z. And so now our job is to make sure that these people are at each other's events and helping mentor one another and participating when a new grantee is awarded a grant in that particular space. Those connections are really exciting. And these people are starting to host events together outside of the grants and outside of the kind of their time frame or their true People's Liberty time obligation. They're doing things together. Because again, we're continuing to make these connections.
I'm fascinated to know, like you've mentioned that you depend on those people that come forward to help make more connections, but I'm wondering how you guys kind of work, because I imagine what you guys do looks very different in like a place like Newport or Bellevue than it does in over the Rhine or in those neighborhoods. Yep. And you guys have a fairly large network that you're working within, don't you?
That's correct. Yeah, we fund inside at People's Liberty specifically. We fund inside the 275 Beltway. So you mentioned Newport, Bellevue, Covington. These are Northern Kentucky neighborhoods that are inside the 275 Beltway. We have zip codes inside the 275 Beltway that include Indian Hill, which is probably one of the one of the nicest zip codes in the country, I would imagine. It's probably a top 100 or top 50 zip code in the country in terms of median home income or net worth, or I don't even know how you would classify it. And then we have, for sure, some of the poorest neighborhoods in the area, in the country, right here. And so People's Liberty becomes this weird microcosm of this community, a weird melting pot and petri dish. It's bizarre. And so our burden is not only to reach out throughout the region to try and attract people to apply, and find ambassadors in neighborhoods and in socioeconomic sectors and through different races and religions, so that we get people from the entire community, truly the entire community. But then once we have all these folks under the tent, is understanding interpersonal relationships and the best way to make connections, and who communicates through Facebook and who texts and who actually talks on the phone, and who takes a week to respond to emails because they don't have internet at their home or they don't have a computer. You just all these things are learnings that we've had now, and I think we're better for it. And we now know where to advertise and which radio station matters, and how to exploit Facebook to the best of our ability, et cetera. So like we've learned a lot of stuff in that regard, of like truly how to reach people through their terms, and not everybody communicates the same way. Not everybody reads the same newspaper. Not everybody listens to the same radio station. So depending on the type of person that we want to attract to apply and participate in this experiment, we need to use a different communication tool. We need to use a different advertising vehicle, et cetera.
I'm also intrigued in terms of I have some familiarity with Cincinnati, and I don't think of it as the most creative or innovative city in the country, but it sounds like there are really interesting things. I look on your website, there's some fascinating things happening there. Do you guys think that you've seen that the needle move in some ways in terms of that community really embracing innovation and thinking differently about things?
Yeah, I mean, I think within the last 10 years here in Greater Cincinnati, just like in most cities, like the whole, first and foremost, this idea of people seeing the value, or at least expressing the value in and interest in the urban core is obvious. Whether that's people shopping, eating, or living closer to the urban core, is that wave has definitely hit Cincinnati as well, and so we're experiencing that, which basically amounts to like young, upwardly mobile people caring about their urban core and wanting to live, work, eat, drink here, and move closer to here, being the urban core. So I think Cincinnati has definitely experienced that in the last 10 to 15 years. Cincinnati has definitely experienced a wave of this kind of startup culture, whether it's people wanting to co-work, co-locate their small businesses, or try and get investor funding to start a startup or something of that nature. Cincinnati's experienced a nice wave of that. And then I think another thing that has added to this fabric here is the corporate community. We have Fortune 500 companies in spades here. They've understood how important it is to try and be and have the feel of being young and hip and urban centric, and that has a big impact on your community. It's a little less authentic, but it matters in who they hire and how they hire and where they, being the big corporations, are interested in having their offices, and how that changes neighborhoods. I think all of those factors have impacted Greater Cincinnati, and specifically downtown Cincinnati, in where people live, how people shop, where people eat and drink, and have inspired people to be more creative and enjoy public arts and support the museums and some of the institutions, and not be afraid to go start a design company, a web development company, to stop working in that big architecture firm and go out on my own and try and start my own architecture firm, interior design firm, construction company, whatever the case may be. We're definitely experiencing a wave of that, and People's Liberty plays right into that, for sure.
I'm going to guess too that there are certain communities that you find that are very willing to think differently and willing to do outside the box, and others that are not so willing. And so, my dad's side of the family, I'm a little embarrassed to say, grew up in Fort Thomas, which is not at all the most interesting neighborhood in the world.
Right. I don't think we're getting a lot of applications from Fort Thomas. Right.
Famously,
but North Side in Cincinnati is definitely like the alternative weekly neighborhood. We get more than enough applications from the North Side. We don't have to do much advertising over there.
Well, I'm intrigued kind of how do you, you mentioned some of the corporate stuff, which I find fascinating, but how do you get to those more conservative communities? How do you get Indian Hills to like understand that they need to think about things differently when they're doing pretty damn good thinking about things the way they are?
Right. Yeah. So everybody's welcome here. We host info sessions. We write stories. We publish our own newspapers. We have a huge megaphone, and we invite people in, and that's the best way we know how. Whether it's a meal or a cup of coffee or an info session, a brainstorming session, whatever the case may be, we do our best. We do our best to invite everyone and make everyone feel welcome, and that's the best we can do. And if people from Indian Hill, I'm not picking on Indian Hill at all, but if people from that neighborhood choose to show up, they're welcome here just as much as somebody from Fort Thomas or North Side or any other place. Everybody's invited, everybody's welcome. But we drive the conversation, and we drive the opportunity. And if that doesn't resonate with you, or you can't see yourself here, there's nothing we can really do to change that. Yeah.
Well, I was really interested to see that you guys are, I think, just released recently a publication where you're kind of celebrating the people that are doing interesting and innovative work in the area. And I wonder how much of your work is, as much as it is supporting and building these people up, as it is celebrating their successes when that time comes.
Yeah, without a doubt. So Megan and the design and communications team here just published Circle, which I think you're talking about, which was kind of our own take on a alt weekly or a free weekly magazine, and we printed it in kind of dusty old newsprint and have circulated it all over town. And what we did is you'll find a couple of our grantees in there, but what we really tried to do was highlight some of our favorite stories of people who didn't apply and didn't really even need to apply or know about the opportunity to apply, but have gone and done big things in our town. And that could be a coffee shop, that could be a boxing gym, you name it. And Megan and the team went out and interviewed folks and photographed them and put together a really handsome document that just, if nothing else, it's a tool that should inspire or bring hope to anybody in any neighborhood of stop talking about it and go and do it. You've been talking about opening a coffee shop for 10 years. I'm tired of hearing you talk about it. Look at this guy. This gal, they just went and did it. If you need help or resources, they're available. But if you just need inspiration, take a look at this and go give it a try. Stop talking about it. Go do it. That's kind of the mission statement, I guess, of that publication. And I know it struck a chord with a lot of folks. Just to read these simple stories of husband and wife or partners who were, every night before they went to bed, they were talking about we got to do this, I want to do that, and what does it take to actually make that happen? And what does it take for you to quit your job and go and pursue your dream, or work your butt off nights and weekends to make this side project happen until you can quit your job to go do that full time? Any chance we get to produce a story or use a megaphone that can inspire someone to go and do, we're going to take full advantage of that.
It really goes back to that creating an ecosystem of empowerment in many ways, that you just want people to feel like they can most of the time.
Without a doubt. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know where it is, but at one point the team here, Aurora and Megan, Eric and I, like kind of the core four as we call ourselves, we had a document of, it was one of our goals, but then it eventually got like archived, but there were a bunch of words that we wanted to take out of the vocabulary of Greater Cincinnati, which was a goal that was unattainable, but it was an interesting exercise. And like, these are words we want to become synonymous with Cincinnati or Greater Cincinnati, and these are words we want to no longer be spoken here. I got to find that document because there's probably some pretty good stuff there.
That's fascinating. Well, kind of on that note, I wonder, one of the things I love to ask folks is that, I imagine you've been to a number of different communities throughout the country or even beyond, and I wonder, when you get to a place, what do you kind of look to see whether that place is thriving or whether it's not? Are there indicators that kind of tip you off one way or another?
Yeah, sure. I'd say pedestrian culture. How many people are walking, riding bikes? How many people are holding hands or sitting on park benches? That's the first thing that I kind of, I guess, would acknowledge when I'm in a new place is where and how people are congregating, where and how people are moving, truly either on their feet or on a bicycle. That really matters to me. So also, I think just the feeling of density in cities, and for me, it's not always Main Street as much as one block off of Main Street. How does that feel? How are people using side streets and alleys and dark corners and whatnot, and exercising the opportunities there? That's always interesting to me. To when exploring cities, when you get a block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks off of Main Street, what does it feel like? That matters. Yeah.
Well, very good. I would be remiss if I didn't ask this as we kind of get towards the end, but I think what makes you guys so fascinating in some ways is your ability as funders to really drive change in a way that I think most funders want to think that they do, but don't always do. And I wonder if you could just speak to that role of what the role of funders should be at this point as we look in the new challenges we face.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't know if I can speak for funders per se. This is the only time I've ever been on this side of the bank account, I guess, if that's the right term. But I really see it as a partnership. I think we get in trouble. A couple things. We get in trouble as funders when we assume that we know more and can do more just because we hold the purse strings. As I say that, I also recognize the fact that we as funders are in a more powerful position, or we feel like we are at times. And what I'd argue is I think the best possible scenario is when the funder and the grantee are on equal footing, if possible, even if you have to imagine some things to be able to get there, and where the knowledge and the energy and the expertise of the grantee combined with intelligent funding and the Rolodex and the resources of the funder, that's a scary combination. And I think we've gotten as close to that as you possibly can in this bizarre world of funding here, because ego and class and roles and responsibilities and money and all these things that get in the way. If in some sense you can fight the fight together and recognize I can bring some money and some intellect and some resources and some Rolodex and some open doors, and you can bring your expertise in the street and your energy and your commitment and your willingness to go and go and go and go and go, that becomes a deadly combination in a good way. And so I think that's what we're trying to attain every day with our mentorship, with our open door policy here at the building, with all the resources and Rolodex that we try and offer each of our grantees. And what we're looking from them is intelligence and knowledge from the streets and the ability to go and do and work. And we found a lot of success with that. Everybody's had to check their ego at the door and check their authority too. And that's a scary prospect for most funders, I'd say.
Well, you may not be particularly comfortable speaking for funders, but I think it speaks well that you spend more time on the other side as well and can speak to both. And that's a very compelling vision you articulate. So,
cool. Thanks, man.
Well, I wonder if you could kind of share, as we get towards the end, something that you've learned along the way of doing this kind of work that surprised you, or something that you didn't actually think that you'd be thinking was so important, or what's something you've learned along the way?
I feel like there's, with respect to grantees, the grantee funder relationship, I think there's a way to balance communication and expectations and just like overall how to deal with my relationship, grantee to funder, that if a grantee or the doer, the community developer, however you want to consider them, however you want to label the person that's going out and busting their ass to do something amazing, that person. I feel like if that grantee works on their relationship with the funder and understands what the funder really wants, how the funder best communicates, how they want to participate in the process. I feel like if the grantee could figure out how to get that time, to create time to analyze that and to build that relationship, it would pay huge dividends. And the complexity there is having the time and figuring out what a funder wants and needs from the relationship, beyond the contract and beyond the work that needs to be done. What does the funder want? Does the funder want to be at the event or be at the party or be at the unveiling? Does the funder want access to new neighborhoods and new people? Does the funder want to just see success? Does the funder want to be communicated to every hour, every week, every day, every month? Everybody's different. And so I feel like one thing that I've truly learned is if the grantee can figure out how to carve out enough time to build a relationship and understand who their funder is and what they want and what they need, that pays huge dividends over time. That it's creating a value there that's long term, and I think that's really important. When I was on the other side, I don't think I knew that. I feel like I might have been intimidated by funders or not willing to put in time or energy in that relationship because I didn't know how or the best way to approach that or attack that. So I guess what I'm saying is funders, whether they're individuals or organizations or whoever that is, trying to build authentic bridges to the funders, from the grantee to the funder, and vice versa, is super important and could pay long-term dividends for the grantees, whether it's more checks or bigger, better relationships, introductions to potential new funders or partners or resources or whatever the case may be. But I think what happens is a lot of time the grantee is so focused on their obligation or so committed and overburdened by the time commitment required to pursue what they're trying to do that they lose touch with building a relationship with their funder that could last beyond this grant period.
it's kind of revealing that in a group of folks that care about communities, that it's revelatory that we should focus on relationships in some ways.
Yeah, we're all people, you know, and for some funders that's going to be a cup of coffee once a year. For others, it might be it's different. Everybody's different, and so I think a note to grantees of what I've learned in my 3 years of being a fake funder is relationships matter, and it goes both ways. So I think spending some time on that science and trying to uncover what that relationship should be and should look like is really important for grantees, and to not skip out on that and to make it authentic. In some instances, it's a beer. Some others, it's a cup of coffee, and others, it's like suit and tie at the country club. I don't know, but don't do anything you don't want to do, but don't miss the opportunity to build a real relationship with someone that could have grant benefits, resource benefits, Rolodex benefits, vice versa. It's a two-way street for sure.
But I wonder if you could kind of wrap us up here with a story, Jake, of what can happen when communities work well, or what you've seen happen, or what should happen when something works right for a community.
So the first thing that comes to mind is Lisa, who created a project called the People's Pantry, and so she's worked. Her idea was to identify 10 neighborhoods in Greater Cincinnati that don't have access to good food, for lack of a better term, and she wanted to create these mini food pantries in those neighborhoods, and so she came in and won a $10,000 grant, and her proposal was to go get 10 retired newspaper kind of dispensers, for lack of a better term, where you used to put in a quarter and get the daily newspaper, and the door shut automatically. And kind of unlock those so that you didn't have to pay to open them, strategically place them in 10 different neighborhoods, and then get community leaders who would be responsible for each of those to make sure that they're filled, and take what you need, leave what you can. Not unlike the little libraries that you see popping up all over the country in people's front yards or whatever. And she did a great job of designing the units. So they've all been painted by a local artist and kind of redesigned. One looks like R2-D2 from Star Wars. Another one has been repurposed to look just like the church that it sits in front of. She did a great job of strategically placing them, of finding community champions in each community that would keep an eye on them. And the community has responded in a really big way, and she's done a great job. She lives in one part of town, and these now 12 units are spread out all over the region in places that she doesn't live in, obviously, with people who are taking care of them that she doesn't know. But she was authentic, she was real, she did a great job of producing these units and getting them there, and she's super responsive, and the community has responded in a big way. And I think it's been tremendous and super exciting. And it was quick, and it was affordable, and she didn't even spend all of the $10,000. You know, she paid the artist to get them there. She's paid people to go and clean them and fill them, and she's spent money on getting food in them. And it's for less than $10,000. She's feeding hundreds and hundreds of people now, going on 7 or 8 months, which is super exciting.
Wow, what a great story! And I think I noted as you were talking about her, this theme of authenticity comes up again, and it really is an incredibly powerful tool that we don't often talk about in some ways.
No doubt.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I wonder if people are interested in learning more about what you guys do, where can they find that information?
Sure, yeah. So if you look for peoplesliberty.org, peoplesliberty.org. Also, we are definitely on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, just search for People's Liberty. Come visit us in Cincinnati. We're located right across the street from Findlay Market, 1805 Elm Street in Cincinnati, Ohio. Come knock on our door. How about that?
That welcoming atmosphere, absolutely. Well, if y'all are interested in learning more about CityWorks Expo, you can find us at cityworksxpo.com or on any of the social media platforms. But thank you again so much for taking the time today, Jake.
Yeah, y'all have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Big Ideas for Better Places podcast today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a rating. It really helps other people find out about our fascinating guests and find the information that we have to share. Lastly, please save the date for our upcoming event, October 5th through 7th in Roanoke, Virginia, and keep up to date by following us on Facebook and checking out our website, cityworksexpo.com. That's cityworksxpo.com. Thank you guys again and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.